blessings. Today we'll talk about spiritual awakening and the spiritual journey. I will share some things with you from my journey, but you have to know that everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is unique, just as everyone's hell is custom made and the suffering that we go through is very... You can't compare it with other people's suffering. But keeping this in mind, we do share similar things because we are all part of the human collective. So we do share key points that are common. Now, keeping that in mind, I want to start with the fact that I was born in a family that was very spiritual, and in many ways I have been gifted from birth from God with spiritual gifts that I started to express early on, and I was always supported by my family in this. I never drifted apart from my spiritual journey. It was always something that I was very loyal to. I had all sorts of experiences which are not to be expressed and shared now in this video, but maybe some other time. And still, I was doing the work, I was working with myself, but I wasn't breaking free from what it means to have a 3D experience. And what do I mean by that? I mean that currently everyone being born here is facing trauma of some sort. Even if you think you don't have trauma, which was my case, I was like, I don't have any trauma. You kind of have, because you have trauma that is like culturally expressed. It's how the current society raises and educates children. You have trauma from past lives, and also from the bloodline that you were born in. The family that you were born in has trauma. In Christianity, it's also called sin, like the sins of the ancestors, or the sufferings of their ancestors. Maybe they were victims. And in the East, they call it karma. But the thing is that there is stuff to heal. So if you're thinking that you have nothing to heal, you're kind of lying to yourself. So I was working on myself diligently, and I was meditating, and I was seeing other spiritual people and talking to them and reading and watching documentaries and going in pilgrimage and praying and going in retreats and staying in nature and trying to communicate with God and things like that. But still I wasn't breaking free from the suffering. And then year after year my suffering became greater and greater and greater. And I had depression, but it was it's called functional depression. So you are depressed, you have, but you don't seem to, like, people don't realize that you're depressed because you're functioning as a normal person would. You're making jokes, it's only you that feel the suffering that you're feeling, and you feel like no one really understands you in your suffering. And so yeah, the suffering was getting greater. I was getting sick, and then like literally health problems, and then I had miraculous healings. Sometimes healing myself, spontaneous healing, and sometimes spontaneous healing by divine intervention. Like literally Mother Mary coming one night in the astral to me, healing me, and then the next morning I woke up and I was healed, and then I went to the doctors and they didn't find anything anymore. So anyway, but the suffering was still there. I was like in this loop that I couldn't get out of. And then I asked God, please help me get out. I feel like I'm living a lie, like I'm not fully myself. I don't know what I can do to be myself, to feel fulfilled. I feel like I'm not living my purpose, like my purpose is somewhere else. And I was feeling trapped. I was telling the people in my life that I feel like I'm in a sort of prison. But it was not the prison of the flesh. It was the whole experience of life felt like a prison. And then I asked God to help me. And He did. He always does. What happened was that suffering became greater, greater, and greater. And I was trying to work on it, but I didn't fully face it. Like I was denying some sort of suffering that I was like, they were coping mechanisms to survive. And in the same time, it was the ego that didn't want to die. Although I was close to literal death many times in my life. I could have died so many times. I was never afraid of death. I still am not afraid of death. Because I remember past deaths and the transition, and I know that God is taking care of us wherever we are. But I was afraid of life, and I was afraid of pain. I was so afraid of pain and suffering, and all sorts of pain and suffering, be it pain in the body, pain in the emotional body, pain by being heartbroken, trauma, and things that go on this planet, like that you can see on the dark web, and basically a lot of suffering. I was afraid of suffering. And I asked God for help, but I was so desperately in need for help that I was finally willing to surrender. To surrender what? To surrender everything I am, everything I was. I was, God, do what you want with me. Just please, please, please intervene. Please help me break through. And then a big suffering came. And I saw the opportunity in it. I was thankful. But I was so overwhelmed. I was not able to comprehend. I was in denial. I was a person who never cried. And I'm an actor. And I couldn't cry on stage. It was very hard for me to cry, because it was like, for me, I felt like if I wasn't crying, I'm strong or something like that. And what's the point of crying anyway? And I also had a limiting belief from childhood that if you cry too much, you can have like a seizure, or like something can go wrong in your brain, like you can explode, or like you can't cry too much. It's too dangerous or something like that. So I was a person who didn't cry, and in the last years I began to cry, but I did it in my healing journey. So I used to have these meditations that were for processing emotions and repressed emotions from the past and things like that. So I was looking for them, and even if you don't have them from this life, I knew that there must have been from the human collective or from other people's lives, because we are all connected. So I was like, okay, I need to process fear, grief, anger, fear of being abandoned, and all things like that, So I started crying in in a setting where I had a witness, and it was always a light worker or a friend or like someone I could really trust, and we were working together. Sometimes I was the witness, sometimes they were the witness, and we were just letting things out, like exploring all of the pain, all of the fear, and things like that. But I was still trapped. So coming back to the moments where I was suffering so much, it was so that I couldn't control myself anymore. I felt like the body was betraying me by having panic attacks all the time. All the time, I mean, like there were 7 days of several panic attacks every day. And I couldn't understand why nothing was helping me. Going to church, meditating, like nothing was helping me. I felt like the body was betraying me. I was like, why are you crying? Why can't you stop? Why can't we have a normal life? What? Okay, I understand logically that the trauma that I've been through, that the shock, but like I'm strong enough to get past this. I'm strong enough to, like, yeah, whatever, it happened, like we can go past it. But it was God telling me that it's time to be reborn. It's simple as that. And I'm so thankful. And I'm so thankful for the people that brought suffering to my life, because, and they know this, because it was the greatest blessing. But the thing about suffering is, if I had less suffering that I had, I would not be who I am today. But if I had more suffering and not face it, I don't think I would be here today. The thing is, I had a choice. I had the choice. And God told me, you have free will. You can choose. You can choose to go on with the suffering that you're used to, which is sort of a comfort zone because you're used to it. And you can like repress it any longer and keeping yourself busy with distractions from everyday life and things like that. But it's not who you're meant to be. It's not where you're meant to go. It's not how your life should look like. But if you're willing to trust me and take my hand and face all your fears, all your suffering, really face it, look it in the eye, I promise you, everything will be light. And so it was. And so it was, my friends. And so what I did was I changed my life. I knew I had the choice. It was very hard. I told everyone that I'm isolating. Sorry, just remembering it. That I'm isolating, and that for a few weeks I will not be available to talk, to meet, that I'm okay, I'm alive, but I am going deep in the pain, actively choosing this, like I wanted to. People didn't understand. They were like, why are you doing this to yourself? Why? But I had a few friends that were God sent, and they understood, and they said, yeah, you do you. I don't fully understand why you're willing to go through this much amount of pain when you cannot, or you can do it through several years like normal people do. But I was like, no, I'm doing it now. I'm doing it so intensely, and I know it's possible. I know through the stories of the lives of saints, and I know it's possible. So I isolated for a few weeks, and I was blessed not to have to work in those weeks, because what I did was staying at home, well, sometimes leaving the home for somatic therapies, which are therapies that work with the body to get the stored trauma in the body and the blocked emotions and the blocked energy, to get it out. So you go and they trigger you. That's craniosacral therapy, and I also did trigger points. So you have a point where you're like very stiff, and they trigger that point, and then in the days after you get very emotional, and these emotions that were trapped in the body, they get out. So I left my house only for that. But in the other time, I stayed in my house, and all I did for weeks was pray, cry, journal, meditate. And I also took a therapist to keep me in check. And I was talking to her one day a week, just so I have someone who is a specialist to like check up on my like process. But that was only after the few weeks. So for the first weeks, like 5 weeks or so, I was by myself, and that is exactly what I wanted to do, because I trusted God. I knew I was not really alone. God was with me. But I had to do the work for myself. I was not waiting for salvation, like, just hand it to me. Because you have free will as a person. So I also knew that in every hero's journey, sorry, it's emotional, you know? In every hero's story, in every hero's journey, in every myth, the hero has to go in the underworld, in hell, in the land of the dead. So the hero has to die some sort, or has to like explore the underworld and then come back to life. And that is exactly what I wanted to do. So I had this image. I have it to show you here. It's from the tomb where Jesus was, Jesus Christ. So I had this image from the pilgrimage from Jerusalem, and I prayed, and I was, God, Lord, please help me rise just as you have risen. No, you can do this. Let's do this. I will rise, but I have to go in the underworld first. So I faced everything. I looked for triggers. I was like, what can I do to see the pain that I'm in? What brings me pain? Does this object trigger some pain for me? Yeah, okay. Does this photo, does this image, does this concept, what does trigger in me? And where I saw the trigger, that's where I went. And then again, crying for hours and hours. And I was so afraid. My friends came. I'll be back. Yeah. So, where was I? Yeah, the process. It was hard, especially when I thought that if you cry too much, something wrong will happen. So after crying for like 8 hours, I was like, nothing wrong happened. But that's where the therapist helped me, because she was like, no, you're fine. What you're doing, of course, is very brave, and I know of no one who wants to do this in such a condensed time. But I'm here for you, and you do you, and I trust you, and I see your progress by yourself. Like, from every week, you're a different person. You're like, you've grown so much. So I had this confirmation. But I did the work myself. But I was guided. By what? By the pain. The pain was guiding me. God was guiding me. And then what happened? then I started to have these awakenings. And it was just as you awake from a dream, but it was like very sudden. Like you felt it like a punch in the stomach. Like I was like, what? That was the reality? That was the truth? Okay, processing it, trying to accept it, being afraid like of what I'm seeing. Like, is this who I am? Is this who I was? Is this who someone else was? Is this what really happened? Is this what the other person was feeling? Is this what the other person was thinking? Is this what many people were thinking? Like I had also, like God was showing me, and then it settled, the truth. I was like, okay, going back in communication with God, just staying in His presence, being aware, and then again, another awakening. He was showing me through visions, through insights, revelations, and I was like, how could I have not seen it before? How could I live like this before? Like, okay, I understand now, but and then things like that. And as I went through this process, I surrendered myself more to God, more and more and more. Okay, then I'm no longer attached to who I think I am, because I was like, no, this is who I am. You're not. You're not, because you're a child of God and your heart is pure, and you don't need all these mechanisms of protection, of defense mechanisms for life. You need them just until you're ready to let go. And I was ready to let go. And you cannot force this on anyone, because people can go through trauma and not use it in that moment for a spiritual awakening. But it gets stored, and when they'll be ready, they'll do it. You cannot force someone to awaken before his or her time. I could not have been forced, because I needed a certain amount of suffering. And it's weird to say, but it's the truth for me. I'm not saying suffering is the only way, no. Happiness is a great way to expand consciousness. You don't have to go through suffering. But if you already have been through suffering, then you have to face it. You can't be busy with distractions and lying to yourself forever. Especially if you're here watching this video. Because if you're watching this video, it means that you are on a spiritual journey. You're doing it in this lifetime. You're not waiting for another lifetime. Yeah. Then I started to be reborn. From where everything was gray and an emotional hell, everything started to shine so bright. The colors, life, joy. I started to feel happiness like I have never felt before. I started to feel the presence of God. I was aware mentally before all my life, but I have never been aware in the body of the presence of God everywhere. I see God in everything now, because He is in everything. And then my purpose started to happen. Like I started to align with my purpose. I started to align with my journey. And there's this saying that when you're awake, there's no choice anymore. And I find that to be true. At least for me, is because you don't have to choose things anymore. Like, what should I do with my life? Like, no, it's laid out in front of you. Like, God is this is the way. And you're like, okay, God, I surrendered, I keep surrendering, and I'm going. I'm on the way. And I also want to tell you like a quote from Rumi, which was, you have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. And that's true. Because people get their hearts broken by friends, parents, lovers, whatever. Yeah, they get by themselves. They get their heart broken. And then they build walls to protect their heart. But these walls only keep you to survive for a certain amount of time. But these walls don't, it's not how you're supposed to live, with walls around your heart. You're supposed to live with an open heart, in the love of God, being aware of the love of God. So, yeah, that's it. And a quote from me, from myself. I want to tell you that there is no spiritual awakening without God. Yeah, you have to do the things. But always keep in mind that God has your back. Always be aware that no matter what, God has your back. You're like, God, if I go crazy, if I die, if I get sick, no matter what happens through this amount of suffering, I'm not afraid to dive in the suffering, because I know that God has my back. And when God tells you to remove some people or some experiences, or remove yourself, or stop doing things to yourself, like stop lying to yourself, stop telling yourself everything's fine, then you listen to God. Why? Because you have surrendered. You have faith. You have faith that God knows better, because He does. And that He will deliver you. He will save you. But it's a paradox. God saves you by you saving yourself through your choices. God guides you, but you're the one who does the work. But you'll find that in your own spiritual journey. You'll find that healing is not linear. It's not like from this point to this point and then I'm done. We're never done, because we're always expanding. We're never done. That's fine. It's not like we're broken and we need to fix. No, we just need to awaken to who we really are. And our choices need to reflect what our heart is. Like, be true to who you are, you know. I think I have said enough, and I don't want to say too much, because all of you watching this, you have your own journey. Maybe something I have said triggered you. Maybe something I have said inspired you. Maybe something I have said, I wish, that makes you trust in God, that God has your back. But the key points to remember are, although I was on a spiritual journey my whole life, the thing that changed was when I literally asked God to awaken me. Like, God, give me a breakthrough. Help me awaken. Because I kind of know I'm not as awakened as I should. Not as I should be, but as I can be. And I don't think there's a final awakening. Because reality happens on dimensions. And you just change dimension, and then you change dimension. And I think, like, we can't really say we're fully awake or fully enlightened until we can levitate and teleport and go through stuff. But you are more awakened than before. Like, before that, I thought there was only one awakening. Now I know there are several. Because for me, it came in those waves of waking up. that I told you about. Yeah, I've said enough. God bless you people. And I have trust in you. I have faith in you because I have faith in God. And I know that there's a reason why God asked me to do this video for you.